In the heart of the Alaskan wilderness, a woman hiking alone found what no one ever expects to survive: a dying grizzly bear cub, cold, bleeding, and gasping for life. No ranger, no vet, no backup, just her and a choice. But what she did next would ripple far beyond that moment, because weeks later, when the mother bear returned, what happened left even seasoned wildlife experts speechless. Get ready for a true story of courage, sacrifice, and a connection so raw it changed the way we see wild animals forever. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. These stories are real, and we bring them to you so they're never forgotten. The wind cut sharp across the ridge, curling through the trees like a whispered warning. Emily Rowe, 33, adjusted the straps of her pack and squinted into the fog. She wasn't lost, but she wasn't exactly where she meant to be either. It was supposed to be a solo weekend reset, a break from the grief, the city, and the white walls of the hospital room where her brother had spent his last days. He'd loved the outdoors, said the woods made him feel human again. Emily didn't know what they made her feel yet, but she came anyway. And then she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to wind, or birds, or branches. It was short, wet, ragged, like someone trying to cough through broken glass. She stopped walking, held her breath. The sound came again, a rasping breath followed by a pitiful whimper. Her heartbeat kicked against her ribs. She turned off the trail instinctively, boots slipping on pine needles as she moved toward the sound. It took only seconds to find it. A small shape was slumped against a log, barely visible under a layer of rotting leaves and blood-streaked fur. The cub couldn't have weighed more than 40 pounds, a grizzly, unmistakable by the broad head and short ears, but so small, so thin. Its breathing was labored, and one of its back legs was twisted unnaturally beneath it. Emily's mouth went dry. She looked around, no sign of a larger bear, no movement, no sound. Just her and the cub and the weight of an impossible decision. Her instincts screamed at her to back away, but something in the cub's eyes, glassy but locked on hers, kept her there. It didn't growl, didn't even flinch. It just stared. And Emily did something most people would never do: she stepped closer. "I'm not going to hurt you," she whispered. The cub gave the faintest exhale, almost like it understood. Emily dropped her pack. She didn't move fast, every motion was slow and deliberate. She knelt a few feet away, pulled off her jacket, and spoke softly, "You're not going to die out here." She had no medical training, no tools, just a flare of purpose she hadn't felt in months. It took her 20 minutes to figure out how to lift the cub into her arms without worsening its injuries. It didn't fight, its head rested against her chest like it had already given up. She wrapped it in her jacket and whispered over and over, "Stay with me." The trek back down the ridge was brutal. Her legs ached, her shoulders screamed. The cub wheezed against her chest, but Emily kept going. 5 hours later, she stumbled into a ranger outpost, half frozen, soaked in blood, and carrying a dying bear in her arms. The ranger on duty didn't ask questions, he just radioed for wildlife rescue. Emily sat beside the cub the entire time, her hand on its chest, whispering stories about a brother who once believed that kindness could change the world. The veterinary transport team arrived at the ranger station an hour after nightfall. Emily watched as they carefully sedated the cub and loaded him into a padded crate with portable heating and equipment. No one said it, but she could see it in their eyes, they didn't think he'd survive the night. "He's critical," said the lead wildlife vet, a soft-spoken man named Dr. Keene. He's lost a lot of blood, internal damage, probably separated from his mother during the last storm. Could have been days alone. Emily stayed quiet. Her clothes were stiff with dried blood, her hands trembling with fatigue, but her eyes didn't leave the cub. He was barely breathing. That was enough. "You should go home," Keen said gently. "I'm coming with you," she replied, voice steady. The team exchanged looks. No one argued. The ride to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center was long and silent. Every bump in the road made Emily flinch. She sat beside the crate, her hand resting near the bars, whispering, "You're going to live, do you hear me?" The cub didn't move. By the time they arrived, the staff rushed him into the trauma bay. They didn't let Emily in. She waited on a bench outside, staring at her blood-stained boots until sunrise. At 6:42 a.m., Keen emerged, exhausted. "He's stable," he said, "for now." Emily let out a breath that didn't sound human. Her whole body shook. "He's strong," Keen added, "but we've never had one come in this far gone. Whatever you did, you bought him a chance." Over the next days, Emily returned every afternoon. At first, the staff assumed she would fade away like most civilians do after an emotional encounter, but she didn't. She helped with feeding schedules, scrubbed crates, sat near the cub's enclosure. He had been named Ash for the color of his matted coat and the way he had nearly faded into the earth when they found him. Ash didn't move much, but each time Emily entered the room, he lifted his head. At day 5, he sniffed her hand. At day 8, he licked her palm. "He knows you saved him," one of the caretakers said. Emily didn't answer, but in her chest, something that had long been frozen cracked. She had saved him, yes, but maybe, just maybe, he was saving her too. One evening, as she sat beside his enclosure, Ash pressed his paw, still wrapped in gauze, against the glass. Emily placed her hand on the other side. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. But far away, beyond the hills and valleys, someone was looking for him. A she-bear, large, scarred, and grieving, moved through the forest with fury in her bones and the scent of her missing cub still fresh in her soul. And what she would do next, no one was ready for. Ash's recovery was nothing short of a quiet miracle. 3 weeks after arriving at the center, the cub could stand. A week later, he began taking slow, unsteady steps. His left hind leg still dragged slightly, damaged from the injury, but he was moving, eating, growing. Emily was there for every milestone. She'd taken leave from work indefinitely. No one in her life really questioned it, not after everything with her brother. The people who knew her best understood that she needed this, that maybe she'd found something in that clearing she hadn't known she was looking for. Ash was no longer just a rescue. He was her reason to breathe. "He responds to your voice more than food," one of the staff members joked. Emily smiled but said nothing. She knew it was true. Each day, she'd sit by his enclosure, reading aloud from a battered paperback or humming softly while he ate. She never reached through the fence, never treated him like a pet, but he always drifted toward her, lay beside her through the chain link, and rested his head near her feet. He was wild, but there was trust. Across the valley, the wilderness had not forgotten him. In the forests below Mount Eccles, deep claw marks began to appear on trees near trail cameras, shredded logs, and unsettled dens. Local hikers reported spotting a large female grizzly far closer to the edge of the valley than usual. "She's searching," Keen said one evening, holding a printed photo from a trail cam. Looking for something, Emily stared at the picture. The bear was massive, eyes narrowed, fur damp from a recent storm. In the photo, she was sniffing the air, nose tilted up as if catching a memory carried on the wind. "Is it her?" Emily asked. "Probably," Keen said, "and if it is, she's getting close." That night, Emily sat longer than usual beside Ash's enclosure. He was stronger now, pacing his small indoor habitat with slow confidence. But when she began humming a tune her brother once whistled on hikes, he came to her and sat. They stayed like that for nearly an hour, a woman and a wild animal breathing in rhythm. But the moment was shattered by a loud crash outside the facility. Everyone froze, then came the howling of the hounds. The rescue center kept guard dogs along the fence line, their cries were sharp and panicked. Keen burst into the room. "We've got movement near the outer perimeter." Emily stood instantly, moving. One of the fences was clawed open, big, powerful. She looked down at Ash, who had suddenly gone rigid, nose in the air. He let out a soft sound, low rumbling, and turned toward the door. "She's here," Emily whispered, and no one knew what would happen if she found them. The power went out just after 10:17 p.m., not city power, but the generator that supplied the wildlife center. The whole compound fell into shadow. Flashlights flickered on, radios snapped alive. Outside, the dogs were still howling, a chorus of alarm echoing across the dark hills. Emily didn't wait. She grabbed a lantern and ran. Ash was pacing his enclosure, agitated. The thick fur on his shoulders stood up in ridges. He moved to the gate, sniffing at the seams, then turned sharply toward the east wall and growled, not loudly, but deeply. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. Keen arrived seconds later. "Something hit the back fence," he said. "We think it was her." "She's not here to attack," Emily said. "She's here for him." "We don't know that," he warned. "If she sees you with him, she might see you as a threat." Emily shook her head. "She's a mother." Keen looked at Ash, now sitting completely still, nose lifted, body trembling. "She's closer than we think." They moved outside carefully. Floodlights were out, but the moon was full. It lit the woods in silver. Then, movement at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the last fence post, she emerged. The mother bear was massive. Her coat was a dark, unwashed brown, streaked with sap and old scars. Her head swayed slightly as she stepped into view, powerful shoulders rolling forward with each step. She stopped, saw them, and silence fell. Emily didn't breathe. The dogs were locked inside, the staff had gone silent behind closed doors. It was just her, Keen, Ash, behind a layer of steel and mesh, and the mother who had crossed miles, storms, and danger to find him. Emily raised her hand slowly, a calming gesture. The bear didn't move. Then, something unexpected happened. Ash let out a soft, low moan, a sound of longing, of recognition. The mother growled in response, not in threat, but in answer. They saw each other. Emily's throat tightened. She turned to Keen. "We have to let him out." He looked at her like she was insane. "Emily, she came for him. She's not going to stop. And if we keep them apart, she might destroy this place." Trying, he hesitated. His training screamed no, but his instincts and the way the bear stared at her cub through the wire said maybe. She turned back to the cage. Ash was pressing his body against the corner, eyes locked on his mother. A wildness filled him she hadn't seen before, not danger calling. Keen swore under his breath. One chance. They disengaged the outer gate, not fully open, just enough. Ash didn't bolt. He walked slow, careful. Each paw step deliberate. He stepped into the moonlight. The mother bear took 3 steps forward, then stopped, let out a low huff. Ash, still limping slightly but proud, walked into her side. She pressed her muzzle to his head, and together they turned back toward the woods. But after a few paces, she paused, turned her massive head, and looked directly at Emily, not with fury, but something far deeper, acknowledgement. Then she disappeared, taking Ash with her. The forest was quiet again, no alarms, no crashing fences, no growls or cries. Only wind through the trees and the slow return of dawn. Emily stood in the clearing long after Ash and his mother disappeared into the shadows. The gate still hung half open. Her hands still on the latch. Her chest felt hollow, not empty, but stretched, like she'd given away something she didn't know how to hold on to. Keen placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing." "I don't know what I did," she murmured. The staff repaired the fence. The power came back. The dogs were fed. The world moved forward as it always did. But Emily didn't. For the first time in weeks, the enclosure was empty. She walked past it every morning. Sat beside it every evening. Still read from the same battered paperback. Still left a bowl of water in the corner out of habit. But Ash was gone. She told herself it was good, that this is what healing looked like. Wild things returning to where they belonged. But some nights, when the wind blew just right, she swore she heard his soft growl behind the trees. Days turned to weeks. A local paper ran a story, "Woman rescues dying bear cub, returned to wild in emotional reunion." The comments were full of awe and disbelief. But for Emily, the story wasn't finished. One morning, while hiking the ridge near the same trail where she'd first found him, she noticed something odd, a broken branch, a shift in the earth, tracks. But not just any tracks, bare prints, large ones, and smaller ones beside them. She followed them out of instinct, just a few yards, nothing more. And there, on a flat patch of earth beneath a grove of cedar, something waited, a pine cone placed gently on top of a folded, half-buried piece of flannel, her brother's old jacket, the one she'd wrapped Ash in weeks ago, the same jacket she thought she'd lost during the rescue. She dropped to her knees and picked it up with shaking hands. It was torn, muddy, but unmistakable. Her breath caught. Was it possible? Could he have carried it? Or had she dropped it, and someone, had brought it back? She looked around, heart pounding, searching the trees for movement, for eyes, but the woods were still except for one shape far off near the ridgeline. She saw a large figure, brown and broad. Watching, it didn't move, and she didn't either. Tears filled her eyes. "You came back," she whispered. The figure stood for a moment longer, then slowly turned, disappearing into the pines. Emily pressed the flannel to her chest. Maybe he hadn't returned to be seen. Maybe he returned to say thank you. The pine-scented wind followed Emily all the way back to the rescue center. She carried the torn flannel jacket folded in her arms like it was alive, a relic, a message, proof of something too deep for science and too honest to explain away. When she walked into the staff room, the team stopped what they were doing. She placed the jacket on the table. No one spoke for a moment. Keen stepped forward slowly, his eyes flicked to hers. "Where did you find that?" "On the ridge," Emily said, "folded like it was left for me." The room stayed quiet. Then one of the junior volunteers, a college student who'd been working with the dogs, said softly, "They came back." Keen nodded once as if confirming it for himself. They did. After that, something shifted at the center, not operationally, but spiritually. The staff began noticing signs more often, scat patterns closer to the facility than ever before, bear tracks in pairs, not solo, and always heading in the same direction, the enclosure where Ash had once lived. One morning Emily arrived early, before dawn. She brought the flannel jacket back and placed it gently on the ground inside the empty pen. No food, no bait, just memory. Then she sat and waited. The first light of day stretched slowly across the sky, turning the tree-lean gold, and that's when she saw them, two shapes, one large, one smaller, but no longer tiny. They stood just beyond the perimeter, still in the trees, watching. Ash was unmistakable, stronger now, taller, his fur thick and clean, his limp barely noticeable. His mother stood beside him, taller still, radiating calm power. Emily didn't move. Ash stepped forward, his nose twitching once, twice, then he let out a low chuff, not a growl, not a warning, but a greeting. She smiled, heart hammering. He didn't come closer, he didn't need to. He looked at her the same way he had the night she wrapped him in her jacket, and she knew he remembered. The mother bear turned, nudged Ash gently, and the two disappeared again into the trees. Emily sat there for a long time, staring into the quiet space they'd left behind. There were no photos, no videos, no press, just her and them and the invisible thread that now wove between them. Keen found her an hour later. He sat beside her without saying anything. Then finally he asked, "Do you think animals remember kindness?" She looked at the spot where they'd stood. "I think they remember everything," she said. That night she wrote her first entry in a journal she hadn't touched since her brother died. Some souls never say goodbye, they simply return the favor. Spring in Alaska came late that year, but when it did, it brought color like a secret blooming under silence. Wildflowers rose where snow once buried the earth. Birds returned. The trees whispered softer now. And at the edge of that forest, Emily stood once more, not as a visitor, not as a rescuer, but as someone who belonged. She had taken a position as a permanent wildlife liaison for the sanctuary, not just to stay close to the place where everything changed, but because something inside her had shifted in a way that no city, no job, no ordinary life could reach. She wasn't the same woman who had hiked into the woods to run from grief. She was the woman who had knelt beside a dying cub and found purpose in saving something that had no voice. The world knew her now. The story had spread far beyond Alaska, national news, documentaries, even school children had sent drawings of Ash, little bears wrapped in flannel, held in human arms. But none of that compared to the quiet things, like the morning she found claw marks, fresh, deliberate, on a tree just outside the perimeter. Not wild slashes, just 4 long parallel lines, deep, measured like a signature. Or the time she woke to find a pine cone on her windowsill, balanced carefully, too carefully to be random. And then came the day she didn't expect. A group of researchers was in the woods near the southern border tracking a tagged moose herd when they caught movement on a drone, 2 bears, a mother and her growing cub. The footage was short, less than 10 seconds, but it captured something unmistakable. The larger bear paused and looked directly into the lens. The smaller one, younger but now almost her size, lifted his nose into the wind and made a soft chuff, not at the drone, but toward the direction of the rescue center. Emily didn't cry when she saw the video. She just smiled, deep and quiet, because they hadn't forgotten, and maybe they never would. On the anniversary of Ash's rescue, she returned to the same ridge alone. She didn't bring anything but herself and a folded note tucked inside her jacket. She placed it at the base of the same cedar tree where the jacket had once been returned to her. The note read, I saved you once, but you saved me every day after. Thank you for remembering." She stayed there for hours, and when she left, she didn't look back. She didn't need to, because somewhere far beyond the human world, a bond remained, unwritten, unseen, but unbroken. A promise that the wild would not forget the hand that reached through pain and the heart that never let go. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share it with someone who believes that empathy has no species, and that sometimes the wild remembers better than we do.